In this video, we have a look at drivers at the last second trying to avoid a fork. So we've got a few animations and real-life clips that demonstrate variations on this theme. And as we go through them, we're going to identify points where we can try and mitigate any dangers from arising. In this first animation, we have the red vehicle in this outside lane, green vehicle on the inner lane. And as they travel along at the last second, the driver of the red vehicle realizes he's going in the wrong direction, tries to carry out a hasty maneuver in order to avoid the fork, crosses over the path of the green vehicle, and makes connection. A real-life example of this, multiple lanes traveling in the same direction in order to take the fork. The driver of the blue vehicle at the last moment decides he's going in the wrong direction and tries to avoid the fork. So we're going to progress the video and then just examine 2 points in particular that the camera could pay attention to. So I've just stopped the video at this point because it's at this exact moment the driver of the blue vehicle starts indicating, and at that point as well already starts making the maneuver to cross over the lane. So just to repeat a point that I've repeated a number of times in previous videos, and that is never to indicate and start carrying out the maneuver at the same time. You always want to signal your intentions first, turn on your indicator or a turning signal, let that run for a little while, and only thereafter, when it's safe to do so, do you carry out the maneuver. But the problem in a situation such as this is that a driver doesn't have much time, because he decides at the last second, or maybe realizes at the last second, he's traveling along the wrong lane, and so has to carry out a rash maneuver. He doesn't have the time to let his indicator run for a while, and so tries to see if he can get into the correct lane, and he's willing to take the risk, because drivers in this situation, as I mentioned in the introductory video to this web page or this section on avoiding or taking a fork, is that drivers realize that if they carry on along the wrong route, they're probably going to have to travel many miles or kilometers in order to get back on course again. And so because of that, they're willing to take the risk and carry out a rash maneuver in order to avoid having to take this long detour. So the driver of the blue vehicle does exactly that, tries to cut across and connects with the camera's vehicle. The other point I wanted to point out, and let's just go back a little bit, is that when you, as a camera, find yourself in a situation such as this, never travel alongside another vehicle when you're actually approaching a fork, because of this very situation, in case someone wants to change their mind. So always make sure you hang back a bit, so that if they want to pull across, they're free to do so. But as you're entering into a fork, never travel alongside another vehicle. So that's the one point. The second point is that if there are multiple lanes, such as this is, rather try to stick to the outside lane, because then you don't have any vehicles to the right of you wanting to cross over your path. So if you were in this lane, there's no danger from any vehicles coming from the right. So those 2 points: don't travel alongside another vehicle, and try and stick to the outer lane so that you don't have the risk of any vehicles cutting across your path. In this animation, we see that the green vehicle is not in the lane which is actually to take the fork, but is in the lane that's going to continue more straight. But the danger still exists, because irrespective of whether the driver of the green vehicle is in this lane or the inner lane that is going to take the fork, there's still the risk of a driver cutting across his path. So that's what happens here. So never feel that because you're in the lane, such as the green vehicle is, and there's a solid white line, that a driver is not going to contravene the rules of the road and actually try and cross that solid white line. So real life situation, we've got this vehicle here, which is in the lane to actually take the fork, sees that he's traveling in the wrong direction and tries to cut across the lane. So you can see from the height at which this video is taken, also the width of the hood in front here, that this is a truck. And so being heavier, having greater momentum, it's not as easy for a truck to be able to avoid a situation such as this. And in addition to that, notice that the road is slightly wet. And so as a truck driver, he's got to be careful not to brake harshly, because that can result in the truck jackknifing if he's carrying a heavy load in his trailer. And so he's got to be careful if a situation such as this arises. The driver of the contravening vehicle should also have realized that there's a truck in this lane and been a lot more careful. But let's progress the video and see what happens here. Tries to cut across. Notice that there's a truck parked in the shoulder of the road, so he doesn't have any space to continue down this lane. Had the truck not been there, then the best thing that he could have done in this situation is just to continue along this lane until he could get over into the middle lane. But because the truck is parked there, he's forced to actually cut across. Now, fortunately, the truck driver was alert and so actually moves over a little bit. Otherwise, there could have been a much worse collision. In this animation, a similar situation where we've got the driver of the red vehicle in the wrong lane, realizing that he actually wants to try and avoid the fork. But the difference being is that he's slowed down. And so he's traveling very slowly, or maybe even had stopped in front of the barrier over here in the middle section, may even have stopped, and now tries to cut across into this lane. So that makes it far more dangerous, because the speed differential between the red vehicle and the green vehicle is now a lot higher than in the previous animations. So it would seem almost unbelievable that a driver would do that. One would think that the driver would keep an eye out for any oncoming vehicles, and one may assume that, but as we'll see in the real life clip to follow, that we can never assume such a thing. We've always got to be wary that people will do something that is ridiculous or unexpected. So here we've got this vehicle that's trying to avoid the fork, has come to a stop, or is traveling very slowly. One would expect that he would see the camera and wait until the camera's passed and he's free to actually pull across into the lane, but this is not the case. So fortunately, the camera also aware of the situation, and so just moves across to the left lane, avoids connecting with the driver of this vehicle. But had the camera been even more alert, he would have been better off actually moving across to the right-hand lane earlier on, so as to allow this driver the space to come across. But now for the driver of this contravening vehicle, note that there is a bit of a shoulder that he could have traveled down. Well, first thing is that he needed to actually wait until he was free to move across into either the lane or the shoulder, which is a little bit narrow. So his vehicle would have still stuck out into the lane a little bit. So that would have been the first thing for him to do. But if there was the necessity for him to pull out, rather than to stick to the shoulder, try and build up speed on the shoulder before merging into the main lane of traffic.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.